My guest today is wrestling legend, one half of the fabulous Rougeau brothers. We've had Jock on previously. 5 times he's been a guest, actually. It's Mr. Raymond Rougeau, also Mayor of Rawdon, Quebec as well. I've got to say that to you. And Jock said you must say about him being a mayor. Welcome to Stu's Wrestling Podcast for episode 184.
Thank you, Stu. How are you?
All good, all good. Now, I watched your career, especially in WWF, when you were wrestling with Jock. But yeah, just starting out, the Rougeau name, the Rougeau family, just you're standing in Montreal. Starting out, you're starting the business, the wonderful business of pro wrestling.
I started back in 1971. I was 16 years old. And I was brought up in it. My father was a wrestler. My uncle was a wrestler. My great uncle was a wrestler. And when I was a kid, my dad used to bring me to the arenas where he would wrestle. And I'd go and watch him. And when I was 13 years old, he asked me, he says, Ray, would you like to be a wrestler one day? At that age, you don't know what you want to do. But I knew I wanted to please my dad. And he said, and I saw in his voice and his expression that he would have liked for me to follow in his footsteps. So I said, yeah, sure. But like I said, I was a 13-year-old kid and I was watching these guys wrestle. I was thinking, I could never get in the ring with these guys, And but he says, if you listen to me, he says, you start training, you listen to me. He says, at 16 years old, he says, you'll start your first professional match, which was right. At 16 years and 3 months old, I had my first match.
Were you ready for it at that point, or was it too soon for you?
No, I was ready. I'd been training for 3 years, and I was very dedicated. I was working out literally 364 days a year because there was one day I missed one time because I was sick. My dad says, well, he says, you were lazy. You could have done a little bit anyways. But I was working out on the weights every day. I was going to the gym, learning the trade, how to wrestle. And I did that for 3 years. I mean, nonstop. So when I started at 16, I was already bench pressing over 300 pounds. I can't hear you.
You were ready for it, most definitely. Strength, upper body strength. So yeah.
Oh yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, cardio, upper body strength. Wrestling ability, because the thing was, I had a bit of a pressure because coming into the business, being a Rougeau, and I was following the steps of my father and my uncle, who were very popular at the time. The expectations were high, so I could not afford to make a first bad impression because right away they would judge me and they say, oh, he's not as good as the rest. So when I came in on my first match, I probably had the experience of somebody who'd been wrestling 3 years already.
Great, great start, isn't it? Amazing, yeah, amazing. Now, obviously, in Montreal, wrestling within Montreal, Quebec, how was that? How were the crowds? Wrestling's changed a lot, but obviously it was a lot different. It was a lot different back then. So I'd love to hear about that.
Well, everything was different back then. First of all, when I started, the wrestling TV shows were in black and white. so a lot of young people today say, "What? You wrestled when there was black and white TV?" Yes, I did. And but the whole concept of the show was different back then. The storytelling in the matches was different. You had to understand the psychology of wrestling and how to build a match like a movie. You have to come in, there's a beginning, you start building, there's a suspense, and you have the climax at the end. So you have to know how to use the ring psychology, which I was taught, which you had to back then, because that was the name of the game. The fans were great. They were different. Like today, everyone sees it as sports entertainment. Now, they go along with it. They live the storylines and they feel the emotions. But back then, a lot of people were under the impression that we're really going to destroy each other. So the intensity was different. You had people back then that would jump the guard railings, want to jump in the ring to defend you, you fight the other guy. It was maybe a little more intense as far as animosity. from the crowd towards the heels. You know, a lot of wrestlers were attacked back then by the fans. There were a lot of riots. In the 70s, I was probably in about 5 or 6 riots to where it got so hot that the people would start throwing chairs. Back then, the chairs weren't tied together. So they're all individual. So they stand up, pick up the chair and throw it in the ring. I remember being covered in chairs in the ring. Not that they wanted to get me, they wanted to get my opponent, but we're in a very confined environment.
That worry you, the not knowing that and that happening, or was that not in your psyche? You were thinking about the match, I assume.
You mean when the riot started?
Yeah, no, obviously knowing that could happen, did it ever come into your mindset, oh, there could be an issue here?
No, actually, the few times it did happen, all of a sudden it explodes and then it happens. But you don't go in a match saying we don't want to get too much heat in case of. No, you want to go out, get as much heat as you can, have the best match possible. And like I said, 99% of the time, people won't throw chairs. But when it did happen, well, then you had to cover, But you went out and tried to get the most heat possible and have the best match possible.
Which of the territories did you go to? Obviously, we'll speak about WWF. I wanted to ask, where you went, outside of Canada, Quebec. Where else did you go?
But that was when we were in the WWF or before?
Prior to WWF.
I wrestled in Germany in 1977 in Hanover. There was they called it the World Cup tournament back then. We were 3 weeks in the same place, in the same building every night, and it was built like a tournament back then. So I was there. Right now in WWE, what's the German kid's name? Young guy right now. Kaiser. I wrestled his dad.
Yes.
Axel Dieter was his father.
Yeah.
I wrestled him in 1977 in Germany. And I went to Japan also. So I wrestled 2 months in Japan. I was in the northeastern United States also. I went to Atlanta actually for basically 3 years, in and out of Atlanta. That was with the NWA back then. I wrestled for the Sheik in Detroit, which was Michigan, Ohio area, New York State. Wrestled for Johnny Powers back around Buffalo, Rochester, Cleveland, Akron, that area. So northeastern United States, Atlanta, Florida a bit, Germany, and Japan. Before WWE.
Absolutely. So it set you. You were right and ready for WWF at the time, and you've said about all them territories you've been to.
Yeah. Well, when I went to Japan, I was there for 2 months. So that's a long tour. 2 months in Japan, 1975. I was 20 years old, and but I got a lot of experience there, different style. And actually, I worked heel in Japan. That was the first time in my life that I kind of worked heel. So because back then, they always bring in foreigners to wrestle against the Japanese wrestlers. They were the baby faces, and we were the heels. So that was the first time in my life I had a taste of working heel. I wrestled with Antonio Inoki back then, Seiji Sakaguchi, Strong Kobayashi. They were big stars back then.
Amazing, Raymond. Amazing. Just so cool. I just love it. I love hearing about guys' career. You lived it, and for us fans going back to territories, because I had to go back. I only knew WWF in 90 when I started watching it. It's a treasure trove for me, watching matches of you and Jock. Clips have come up of Jock in Memphis. And he's like, I was in Memphis. I was like, oh my God, a young Jock Rougeau. So it's a treasure trove for us fans watching you guys prior to WWF.
Well, it's fun because a lot of people because the generations grow, but they don't even realize there was wrestling before WWF. So for them, that's always been what wrestling was. No, there was a prior to that, and they were all different territories, different organizations. Vince transformed the world of wrestling with the WWF. He went and got the top talent from most of the territories and created like a super territory with that. And that's how he killed all the other promotions. But basically, for a lot of guys, it was bad because they lost their territories and lost their jobs. But for the few that were selected to go to the WWF, It was like we made it to the major leagues, you know. So for my brother and I, it was great.
Amazing, amazing. Now we're going to get to WWF. It's my favorite time period. I started watching in '90, but the first tape I had was the second annual Survivor Series from 1988. So you guys were still faces. I know you've been with WWF prior to that, but that was the first time I saw you guys was on that tape, on the VHS tape. So yeah, just being faces initially and how that was for you.
It was okay. I can't say it was great. We came in as baby faces because Vince wanted also, we were baby faces here when he came and got us. And he wanted to conquer the French market. So he wanted to go to France and the Belgium and all that. He needed French-speaking talent for that. That was my brother and I. So he brought us in as baby faces, which we did very well. The first show we did in Paris, we were in Paris and we sold out. So that was great, and we were the main events there. Wow. So he had accomplished what he wanted to, but for my brother and I, it was difficult because most of the shows were held in the United States back then, and the thing is, the American public are very patriotic. It was difficult for them to want to cheer for my brother and I, who were Canadian and French Canadians on top of it. They had a hard time cheering for us wrestling against American wrestlers. So we were caught between a rock and a hard place. And it was a difficult situation to be because that's the worst place you want to be. You want to be loved or you want to be hated. You don't want to be caught in the middle. And my brother and I were kind of caught in the middle. We gained in popularity, but all of a sudden we had hit a plateau and we couldn't cross that line. There was something that the hardcore American fans could not bring themselves to cheer for two French Canadians. So at that point, that's where we started to discuss the future, and the future for us was turning heel. And it's funny because when the first time Vince spoke to us about it, he flew us to Stamford, flew us to New York, had us brought up to Stamford. He wanted a meeting with us. He wanted to see if we were open and turning heel, if we had, if we would be open to that, because it was a first in our family. And it's funny because when he brought it up, my brother and I looked at each other and we started laughing. We said, Vince, last week, my brother and I were talking about that, maybe we should turn heel, they were looking for a reason to hate us. Let's give it to them, And Vince laughed, and that's where we started talking about turning heel and asked Vince how he saw the turn, how he saw it. And Vince is the one that came up with the fabulous Rougeau brother idea with the little American flags and the gradual turn, which we've done like over 3 months. The typical turn is a guy will turn on a baby face, beat him up, all of a sudden the people hate him. He was going to do it in a much more subtle way, how we were going to be telling the American people how much we love them, we want to move there, America is the greatest place. But we'd also make mistakes on their holidays and stuff, which would upset them. We say Happy Memorial Day weekend when it's Independence Day, and they say these two goofs, they don't even know what our holiday is. But we kept feeling, like Vince says, I questioned it because I asked Vince, I said, Vince, how are they going to hate us if we're telling them that we love them so much? He says, we're just going to jam it down their throats so much that eventually they're going to start saying, these guys are full of it. I said, okay. And, Vince was a creative genius back then, And so we went along with it, and he wasn't wrong. Within 4 or 5 months, we were the most hated team in WWE, but WWF back then. We got death threats and everything. It was great.
I can well imagine that, the way the fan base was then, and totally different. Amazing. And you sang your own entrance music, which not many had, to the best of my knowledge at that time. And you had Jimmy Hart. You had Jimmy Hart with you, the fantastic Jimmy Hart. What can we say about him?
Jimmy is the greatest guy in the world. First of all, great human being.
Mm-hmm.
As far as working with him being our manager, Could have asked for a better person. He's so dedicated. He's dedicated to his teams. He always came up with ideas, and my brother and I were always open, to new ideas and talking and trying to be creative and bring new things into the picture. Like our song, Jimmy he was with another musician, another Jimmy, I think. Yes, Jimmy, yes. They wrote the music for it, the soundtrack and all that. And we started working together, the three of us, with the verbiage of the song. And that's why in English, we were saying nice things about the United States, but when we'd refer to the French part, we were burying them, and like being nerds as we were, saying they never know what we're saying in French. For sure, they're going to go and find out what we're saying in French, But it was fun, and the fact is, there again, Vince wanting to go all the way, he flew us down to Memphis, Tennessee, to record that song in Sun Studios. I mean, we could have recorded it in many places. No, he wanted us to do it in Memphis, to do it in Sun Studios, where Elvis Presley recorded, where Johnny Cash recorded, and the fabulous Rougeau brothers recorded. That was great,
Yeah, I had speaking of JJ, I had JJ on a number of years ago now. Great, he was great. I spoke to him about all the music they put together, man. When you look at the repertoire and what they put together, him and Jimmy Hart, amazing the music.
But they were tremendous human beings.
Yeah.
That was the fun part, because you could be we worked very closely with Jimmy. We traveled with him. If you're going to be with somebody that that much, it's fun that it's somebody that you like, and that's somebody that's a great human being and a great person, and that is so dedicated. You could sit. We never felt we were bothering him, and he never felt he was bothering us. When he'd come in, hey guys, I just had an idea. What do you think? I want to run it by you. We're like, great. What is it, Jimmy? And the same with us. Hey, Jimmy, we were thinking of certain things. He was always the same way. Hey guys, let's sit down. Let's brainstorm. That was fun. For me, that's the most fun I had in the business.
Amazing. I tell you what, he doesn't age, that man. I think he turned 80. He turned 80 recently. It's
incredible.
He didn't look 80.
I saw him last year. I was at a signing in the United States. Jimmy was there. He looks the same. The guy, he's incredible. I text him once in a while. How are you doing? And he texts me back. And he called me at one point, my birthday or something, last year. It's just fun to hear from him. Great guy.
As the fabulous Rougeaus, I've asked Jock a similar question. Who did you like getting in the ring with? And the tag division was, what a hotbed the tag division was when you were in it. And it was a joy for us as fans. I loved it. I loved watching the tag matches when I was younger, and going back to it now, Some of your favourite opponents, some of Raymond Rougeau's favourite opponents at that time.
I can say back when we were either the Rougeau brothers or the fabulous Rougeau brothers, the Hart Foundation, because we worked with them when we were babyface and they were heels. And then eventually they were babyfaces, we were heels, and we worked with them again. And with the whole idea of Jimmy Hart turning on them and joining us, and he was like, I'm going to squeal like a pig. I'm going to tell the Rougeau, the fabulous Rougeau brothers, all the Hart's weaknesses, and all this. That was fun. And there was the Rockers also. I really enjoyed working with the Rockers, Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty. We had worked an angle with them when we were heel, and fantastic matches. We had some, back then it was called Ironman matches, marathon matches, which we went 1 hour, and the team with the most falls after 1 hour would be declared the winners. And basically, we'd go 1 hour, Broadway, we'd finish up like one fall apiece or two falls apiece. After 1 hour, we'd go to sudden death overtime. We'd go another 15, 17, 18 minutes. Our match would last an hour and a quarter, which back then, not many guys could do that. And that was Pat Patterson that brought that idea up to Vince, because Vince knew us, being from Quebec, and he knew us. And I had worked with Pat Patterson. Him and I were tag team champions here before I went to the WWF, and he had turned heel on me. Then I had singles matches against him, and we had some hour matches, him and I together. So he knew I was very capable of working hour matches. So he brought that idea up. And it was funny because the first time it was mentioned to the Rockers that we're going to go 1 hour, I remember Sean saying, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do there for an hour, because he was still kind of young in the business. And I said, look, don't worry about it. We'll sit, we'll work out certain spots, this and that. It'll go great. And it did. I mean, it was really, really great matches we had. So I could say those were the two, my two favorite teams to work with back then.
Big on the Hearts. Brett's my favorite. Yep. So when both you guys have said about the matches with the Hart Foundation, and Jim Neidhart, amazing what he could do. But I'm not going to say he was underrated. That'd be wrong of me to say. He was incredible. What a dynamic they had, and loved Brett and Jim.
Brett's one of the best technicians ever in the business. He had a great mind for wrestling. He was a great ring general. He had the psychology, and Brett slept, ate, and lived and breathed for wrestling. He always wanted to make it the best he could, the most credible possible, and Brett always respected the business. And I shared that with Brett because I was the same way. I was very respectful for the business, very respectful for the fans. Brett was the same way. And I always had great conversations with Brett. We could sit down and talk business. And we could relate because we're from the same generation. We're also where our parents wrestled. He came in, Brett went through the hard dungeon, was brought up that way to respect the business. And I was the same way. When I came in, some people would think, oh, he must have had it easy being a Rougeau coming in. No. They didn't want to make it easy on me because they wanted me to, first of all, see if I would crack under the stress, the pressure. Also teaching me literally how to defend myself, to take care of myself, and to have respect for the business, the wrestlers, myself, and the fans. So that was put into your brain. And I was 13 years old. I started building that. That never goes away. When nothing was handed in a silver spoon. I had to earn it. And I paid my dues. I earned it. And it wasn't always easy, but I kept persevering and never quit. And that's where I think Brett and I had it pretty much in common. And, we're in the same generation, Brett and I. So we really connected well. And, I sent him an email not long ago, how you doing, and all that. Same with me. I called him last year. We spoke. Always a pleasure to see Brett.
Thank you for the matches you put on as well. And you know what? I'm like Hulk Hogan. Why the Rougeau family's not in the WWE Hall of Fame? Why the fabulous Rougeau brothers are not in the Hall of Fame? I'm not just blowing smoke. I've said this to Jacques. There's several tag teams that should be in there, but you guys and the man himself, the greatest, pro wrestler of all time, and in what he was known for, he's backed you. I can't fathom why the family's not gone in, and I can't fathom why you and Jacques as a tag team haven't gone in.
The way I look at it, I don't take it personally. No. I think that, yes, we could have a place. We could have a place there. I don't want to sound pretentious or anything because I'm not, but it's part of the business. Now, let's just say, if you look at the inductees, there are always certain people that are absolute, have to be in the Hall of Fame. But other people that should be, that are not, that could be, that's where it becomes a business. If you look at where they held WrestleManias, where they held the Hall of Fame ceremonies, there was always like a certain local flavor that went into the Hall of Fame to create interest, a local interest in it. If WrestleMania were to be held in Montreal, I could almost guarantee we'd be approached to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. So it's a little bit political, it's part of the business. At one point, I mean, it's a well-known fact that Jacques had a falling out with Vince. You know, they weren't on good terms for a while. I think at that point it became political. That's not, you know, it won't happen because, you know, the same as Macho Man Randy Savage was not there because there was things that, you know, that were rumored to have gone on. I think that's one of the reasons why we are not there. At one point, I think you have to let bygones be bygones, move on, and look objectively. With Triple H being there now, it could make a bit of a difference. Me personally, I always had a good relationship with Vince, but like I said, my brother had a more strenuous relationship with Vince. So at that point, I don't think I deserve to be there on my own. I think we deserve to be there as a team, as the fabulous Rougeau brothers. So who knows? It could happen. But like I said, if WrestleMania were to be held in Montreal, I think there would be a good chance at that point. But there are some wrestlers that I could see that deserve to be in that are not. Some are for political reasons, which you know, it exists. I'm sorry, but it does exist. But if it does happen, it would be a great honor to be part of it.
Perfect. Perfectly put. I like it. I like it. Very well answered there, Raymond. Very well answered. I'm going to call you Mr. Mayor now for the next bit. Jacques was like, you make sure you talk about him being a mayor. So I'm just going to come away from wrestling briefly. You're the Mayor of Rawdon, Quebec. I hope I've said Rawdon right. If I've said it wrong, I apologize.
No, you're saying it right. You say it with your accent. It's Rawdon.
Right. Okay.
But yes, it's not a problem.
How's it been? How's that been for you? Being a mayor, I bet you just love. It's just another feather in your cap, isn't it? In life.
I feel like I was born for that. You know, younger, I was never inclined to go towards politics. I was approached in 2002 from a person that was running for mayor here to be part of the city council. I wasn't sure if I wanted to or not, but then I figured, why not? It could be an interesting, you know, I like to open doors in life, see what life has to offer. It could be an interesting experience. You get elected, it's a 4-year term. Actually, the first term I did was a 3-year term because then they were making all the municipal elections at the same day. So the first term was 3 years, then it was 4-year terms after that. So I figured, well, I'll try it. If I don't like it, it's a 3-year term. I'll have experienced it. And then I could say, okay, thank you. Been there, done that. Go home. I didn't need to do it. But I said, it'll be an experience in life. Right now, I'm my 6th consecutive term. I got elected in 2003, reelected in 2005, 2009, 2013, 17, and 2021. Got elected as mayor. They have tried to convince me since 2013 to run for mayor. I did not want to. I was very happy as city councilor. I did accept, though, in 2013 to be nominated as deputy mayor, which is like your vice president. So if the mayor is out of town, the mayor is sick, the mayor dies, I assume the responsibilities of the mayor. So I kind of had a foot in as mayor for 8 years. I did that for 2013. Then even the mayor in place, he tried to convince me to run in 2017. He wanted to leave, but I convinced him to stay. And I said, look, we're doing a great job together. You can take time off. I'll run this. You know, there were certain things that he found were difficult to run. The business part of the city, I said, I'll run that. I have no problem. You do the PR, I'll run the city. So anyways, I did that for 8 years. In 2021, actually in 2020, January 2020, he told me, next election, I'm gone. He said, I'm done. He said, as far as I'm concerned, I'd give you the keys to the city right now. I'm gone. I said, look, finish your term. I'll help you along. And then I had to make a decision. Either in 2021, I figured I'm going to go big or go home, because either I was going to go for mayor or I wasn't going to continue as a city councilor or even deputy mayor under another person. I'd been there 19 years at that point, you know, and I went through one of my terms that I was the only one at opposition. There was an election in 2009. Everybody got beaten. Sometimes there's a wave, you know, that goes by. I'm the only one that stayed and resisted to the wave. It was a very hostile city council, a very hostile mayor. So for 4 years, him and I battled it out. We were in the newspapers all the time. They tried everything. There, the first night that I was elected, they were there. They were yelling, "We're going to make him quit. We're going to make him quit." That was their goal, to make me quit. Well, I'm sorry, but quitting is not part of my vocabulary. So I was there for the 4 years. And after that, the mayor that came in 2014, I'm the one that went and got him. But everybody wanted me to run for mayor. I didn't want to. I went and got him because we had been councillors together before. And he said, at one condition. I said, what? He says, you accept to be my deputy mayor. I said, okay. So then I went 8 years. But in 2020, he told me, I'm not running for next election. I'm gone. So I figured I could wind up in 2021, if I don't run for mayor, with a mayor that's very hostile, and, you know, relive another 4 years of, you know, not quite fun, because you don't advance projects very much. All you're doing is, it's the tug of war, the pulling. It wasn't fun. So I figured, well, I'm going to gather a team myself, and I'm running for mayor. So I figured I'm going to go big or I'm going to go home. And I mustered up a team. I kept 3 of the former councillors and 3 of new councillors I brought in. I got elected, and my whole team got elected. So since then, it's been going great. I mean, you know, projects are moving. We're building things, roads, buildings, libraries. I mean, because you don't have any political bickering going on. We're all working for the benefit of the citizens and the city. So I'm having a great time, and I plan on running again. The election is November 2025. And I plan on continuing as mayor.
Go on, Mr. Mayor.
There you go.
Absolutely. No, great coming away from wrestling. I do like that. I like going into other topics with the guests, and it's currently happening. And yeah, another feather in your cap, Mr. Rougeau there. I'm glad you've done it for so long, and you enjoy it. That's the crucial thing, and you're helping people, and you're helping in Quebec there. So it's amazing.
You know, a funny thing, Stu, is I've been longer in politics now as an elected official than I had as a wrestling career. Because as we speak now, I've been an elected official for 21 and a half years. And my wrestling career lasted 18 and a half years. And I did the commentating for WWE for 17 years.
And I was going to ask you about with Jean Brassard for years. You also did backstage interviewing. You did interviewing in English as well. I used to love it. I used to love seeing you with the microphone interviewing. You were superb.
Thank you.
I never wanted to get in the ring. I've got 2 left feet. You know what I mean? But I could relate, you know, interviewing people. That's always something I wanted to do. So, yeah, it all evolved. You went into an on-screen role there with the microphone.
You know what's funny is, Vince, because when my brother and I left, Vince was like flabbergasted. He says, give me a week and I'll make you guys an offer you can't refuse. I've only started what I wanted to do with you guys. At that point, I just didn't want to do it anymore. The thing was, you're on the road all the time. It's the road that got to me, to where I just wanted to go home. I like being home. And we only managed to get home 5 days a month. Back then, the traveling was insane. I was very unhappy being on the road. The only time I was happy was when we got to the building, and now I'm in the arena getting ready to wrestle. I was happy then. After the match, take the shower, then it was okay. I'm on the road again till tomorrow night, you know? So when we left, I just didn't want to stay anymore. And I remember, and I told Vince, I said, Vince, I understand, and I'm sure you're going to come up with something incredible. But I said, I would like to respect my decision. And I said, I only have 2 words for you. He kind of looked at me, because sometimes it's not flattering. And I said, thank you. I said, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for, for what I've experienced here. I just want to go home. Please respect that. And he was like, just hear me out. Give me a week. Anyways, I didn't want to hear it out. So he talked to Pat Patterson. He says, I need to find a way to keep him. And that's when he came up a couple of weeks later with the idea, Ray, would you like to become an interviewer? Do it. I said, I don't know if I can do it. I've never had formal training for that. he says, "Oh, you'll do great," you know. So I started and I learned on the job. And he liked but my first question was, "What's the schedule?" I said, "I don't want to be on the road. If I'm going to be on the road as an interviewer, I'll stay on the road as a wrestler." So he says, "No." He says, "The schedule back then, we would tape once every 3 weeks. So we tape one night of Superstars and one night of Challenge, WWE Challenge." So basically, I started doing the once every 3 weeks. I'd go to where they were taping, and I would do 3 interviews per show. So basically, I do 6 interviews once every 3 weeks, and I was off the rest of the time. So I said, okay, that I can live with a schedule like that. And then after that, he enjoyed what I was doing, and then he started implicating me more, and then more, and then I started doing the French commentating. So every week, our show was aired in France, in Switzerland, Belgium, and Africa, in France and Quebec. So I started doing that every week, once every 3 weeks on the road for the interviews. So I was doing English, French, doing anything. I was kind of like a handyman for him, because a couple of times back then you had Gorilla Monsoon doing commentary in English for England with Lord Alfred Hayes. And one time I was doing the French. I was done. I was going to leave. They said, "Alfred can't be here because he's having travel issues. Would you mind doing the English with Monsoon?" I said, "Yeah, no problem." So I could do English, French, whatever. I was doing the segments face to face. I think you remember those.
I do. Of course I do. I do. I loved it.
Well,
I loved it as a
well,
kid.
I was the only one that, from the beginning until the end, did it. There was me and Gene Okerlund, me and Stan Lane, me and somebody else. But I always did the face to face segments. I did them for everywhere, for Europe, for Mexico, for anywhere in the world. And then I became the main anchor for the French show. So then every week I was the main anchor for the French commentary. Like I was the Michael Cole, let's say, of the French show. And I did that for years. And then I had a new colleague with me. But then, so I was doing the pay-per-views. Then they approached me to start doing the in-ring interviews. So, you know, like during the show, you'd have in-ring interviews. I'd introduce Undertaker, Yokozuna, you know, Macho Man, different guys. I'd be doing the live interviews on the ring, doing the backstage interviews, doing the French commentary. Then I was traveling more, but I was enjoying it. I developed a passion for it.
Then were the days as a fan. It was better than the Attitude Era, late 80s, early 90s. Still my favorite time. Obviously, I got into my teenage years, just on the cusp. You think I would have preferred the Attitude Era? No, not the case. Not the case. I get shot down all the time, Raymond. You must have preferred the Attitude Era. No. And before we go, Loot Academy 2024, that Jock has made into something massive. I've had Jock on over the last 2 years at various points. You are a judge with the great Gino Brito, wrestling legend. So yeah, you're going to be a judge. Jock stayed away from being a judge, as you said. So yeah, how are you looking forward to that? How much are you looking forward to that?
I'm looking forward to it because it's come such a long way, his wrestling academy. I remember a couple of years ago when he started, it was smaller and it grew and grew. And last year at one point, one of his judges couldn't be there and he called me and asked me, he says, "Ray, would you mind being a guest judge for one time? Because, you know, I'm missing a judge and all that." And I said, "Well, okay." But I said, "I don't feel like going to Montreal." I said, "Oh, we could do it, you know, via Zoom like that, you know, can connect." I said, "Okay, I'll do it." You know, I didn't know what to expect. I wanted to help him out, but you know, I still wasn't sure if I wanted to get into it or not. I was so impressed by the talent he had there. I was so impressed by the quality of the wrestlers he had, and that was like, wow. And then he asked me the next day, "How was it?" I gave him, hey, 2 thumbs up. I said, I was really impressed. And it was a difficult job judging because some of the people I had to eliminate, I didn't want to eliminate. You know, personally, I would have liked them both to go through, but I couldn't. I had to choose one. And I found it difficult because I didn't underestimate what it represented to them. For them, it was possibly a break of a lifetime to get into the business and to go, who knows where they could go. And my decision was going to eliminate one and pass the other one. I took it very difficult. I had a hard time sleeping after because there were a couple that really disturbed me. I really would have liked to make them both go through, but I couldn't. But I thought it was an interesting experience in life because you have two people that are hanging on your decision, and it's their lives that are there. And it's like, wow, I took it very seriously. He asked me to come for the main event, for the finals of his wrestling academy. I went and did it in person that time because I had such a good time when I did it virtually. I said, I agreed to go do it in person. And there again, it was like, wow. And so this year he asked me, he says, would you agree to come back? So we checked the dates, make sure I was available and all that. And I agreed. It's going to be in 4 events. And I'm going to go there live to commentate the events and judge the 4 events live with Gino. And I had such a great time. I'm looking forward to it again this year. It's going to take place in September. So this year, the talents, he's got more talent. The stakes are higher. Everything is just bigger. And that's a tribute to the work and the energy and the time he's put into it, the dedication he's put into it. He's very dedicated to what he does. Not everybody would be willing to sacrifice like he did, to put the time in that he did, the energy and the money and the risk and everything comes with it, the nights of not sleeping and all that, to perhaps discover the future talent of our business, and for me, that's looking forward to, the next generation of fans are going to look into. They may have started at Wrestling Academy.
It's just amazing what he's managed to do with it. And yeah, again, and the winners get to go down to Mexico to learn that style. I know he had the Nightmare Factory. He had Cody Rhodes' place.
Yeah, and now it's Japan. They're going to go to Japan.
Yes.
Yes, they're going to Japan this year. They're going to learn in Japan, believe me.
What just amazing for these young talents. Before you go, Raymond, what advice would you give to young wrestlers? What wisdom can you impart? You're in the business for so long, and I know the youngsters, they look up to you guys, and you've got so much knowledge, a wealth of knowledge. What would be your advice for them getting into the business and having a prolonged career in the business?
First thing, stay true to yourself. Be who you really are. Don't be influenced by the wrong people. When you get into that, there are all sorts of people that come around. Be myself. Vince told me, Vince McMahon said, you're like an extraterrestrial in our business. The thing is, I never smoked. I never did drugs. I never drank. I never went out and partied in bars. For me, I was a dedicated professional. For me, it was training. I never took steroids, So none of the things that were rampant back in the 80s, I did. And Vince says, you're like, in our business, it's like you're from another planet. I said, thank you, Vince. I appreciate that. I take that as a compliment. So for me, the advice I would give to somebody coming in is, don't go crazy. Keep your feet well grounded. Stay rooted. Keep your values. Don't forget where you came from. And just because all of a sudden you get success and all of a sudden you're making money, don't go crazy. That could all disappear tomorrow. So, that's the advice I give.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time. I know time is precious, of course, for what you're doing as mayor there in Quebec. So yeah, just thank you, Raymond. Thank you so much for coming on. I've had the other half of the Rougeau brothers finally on the show.
Thank you, Stu. Thanks for having me on your show, and keep up the good work.
No problem. I will have you back on at some point. I promise you. My guest today for episode 184 of Stu's Wrestling Podcast out of Wales in the UK is Raymond Rougeau, former WWE, WWF talent wrestler, ring announcer, you name it, commentator, you've done it all, and also Mayor of Rawdon, Quebec. I still can't say it correctly. Has been my guest today on Stu's Wrestling Podcast. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.